Hello and welcome to my channel. I hope you enjoy this story. I'm going to try and upload a new story each day. The Wretched Wax Museum. Holly Arnold was no stranger to the allure of history and mystery. As an investigative journalist with a penchant for the peculiar, she had covered countless stories that others dared not touch. But nothing in her career had prepared her for the call she received that rainy morning in late October. The voice on the other end was gruff and urgent, belonging to an old colleague from university, Sam Brightman. He had become the curator of a recently reopened wax museum on the Isle of Wight, a place long forgotten and shrouded in local legends. "Holly," he had said, his voice trembling, "you need to come here. There's something wrong with this place." Curiosity piqued, Holly caught the first ferry to the island. As she disembarked, the cold sea breeze whipped through her hair, carrying a hint of something ancient and malevolent. The Isle of Wight, with its rolling hills and picturesque villages, seemed an unlikely setting for anything sinister. Yet, as she approached the museum, an imposing Victorian mansion on the outskirts of town, an overwhelming sense of dread washed over her. The Wretched Wax Museum had been a local attraction for decades before it closed mysteriously in the 1970s. Its reopening had been met with a mix of excitement and unease. The townsfolk whispered about the lifelike quality of the figures, how they seemed to follow you with their eyes, how they seemed to breathe. Holly pushed open the heavy oak door and stepped inside. The air was thick with the scent of melting wax and something else, something metallic and sharp. The dim lighting cast long shadows across the room, where wax figures stood frozen in various poses, depicting scenes from history and folklore. "Glad you could make it," Sam's voice echoed through the cavernous hall. He emerged from the shadows, his face pale and drawn. "I've been seeing things, Holly, the figures. They move when I'm not looking, and there's this room in the basement. I haven't dared to enter it alone." Holly followed Sam through the labyrinthine corridors, each lined with eerily lifelike figures. She couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. They reached a heavy door at the end of a narrow staircase. Sam hesitated before unlocking it, his hands trembling. The basement was dark and musty, filled with old crates and forgotten relics. In the center of the room stood a large, ornate mirror, its surface tarnished with age. "This is it," Sam whispered. "This mirror, it's the source of it all. I can feel it." Holly approached the mirror, her reflection distorted and wavering. Suddenly, a cold hand gripped her shoulder. She spun around, but no one was there. The figures in the basement seemed to have shifted, their eyes following her every move. "We need to get out of here," Sam urged, but Holly was transfixed by the mirror. She reached out to touch its surface, and a jolt of energy surged through her. Images flashed before her eyes, ancient rituals, blood sacrifices, and a dark figure emerging from the depths of the earth. "Holly, no." Sam's voice broke through the vision. He grabbed her arm and pulled her back just as the mirror began to pulsate with a sinister light. They stumbled out of the basement, slamming the door behind them. "We need to destroy it," Holly gasped, her heart pounding. "That mirror is a gateway, the curator. He's trying to resurrect something ancient, something evil." Sam nodded, his face set with determination. "There's a legend," he said. "An ancient evil bound to the island, imprisoned by the first settlers. They used the mirror to trap it, but it can be released if the proper rituals are performed." They spent the next few hours gathering information and supplies. Holly contacted a local historian who confirmed the legend and provided them with the details of the ritual used to bind the evil. Armed with this knowledge, they returned to the basement. The air was thick with tension as they set up the ritual. Holly could feel the presence of the wax figures, their eyes boring into her. "Keep watch," she told Sam. "Make sure they don't move." She began to recite the incantation, her voice steady despite the fear gnawing at her insides. The mirror began to glow, and the temperature in the room plummeted. Shadows writhed and twisted around them, and Holly felt a dark presence pressing against her mind. Just as she completed the final verse, a deafening roar filled the room. The mirror shattered, releasing a wave of dark energy that knocked them off their feet. Holly struggled to her feet, her vision blurred. The wax figures were melting, their features contorting in agony as the dark presence was pulled back into the depths of the earth. "It's over," Sam whispered, his voice filled with relief. "We did it." Holly nodded, but as they left the museum, she couldn't shake the feeling that something had followed them. The townsfolk spoke of strange occurrences in the days that followed, and the museum was once again abandoned, its doors locked and barred. Holly returned to her life, but the experience haunted her. She knew that some doors, once open, could never be fully closed. The ancient evil had been thwarted, but its presence lingered, waiting for the next opportunity to break free. And Holly vowed to be ready when that day came. Months passed, and Holly Arnold tried to return to the rhythm of her normal life, but the shadows of the Wretched Wax Museum lingered in her mind. She wrote a detailed exposé on the museum, which garnered national attention, but deep down, she knew that the story was far from over. The darkness she and Sam had confronted was not easily vanquished. Then, one chilly night in early spring, her phone rang again. It was Sam. His voice was tense and urgent. "Holly, you need to come back. Something's happening. It's not over." Against her better judgment, Holly agreed. She boarded the ferry to the Isle of Wight, the sense of dread growing with every mile that brought her closer to the cursed museum. As she arrived, the island seemed eerily quiet, as if holding its breath. Sam met her at the pier, his face lined with worry. "It started again," he said. "The figures, they're moving, and people are disappearing." Holly felt the chill run down her spine. "We need to find out what's going on and stop it for good." Together, they headed to the museum. The once grand mansion now looked even more decrepit, its windows dark and foreboding. They forced open the heavy oak door and stepped inside, their footsteps echoing through the empty halls. The wax figures seemed to watch them with malevolent intent, their eyes glinting in the dim light. Holly could almost feel their waxy hands reaching out to grab her. "We need to go back to the basement," she said, her voice barely a whisper. Sam nodded, and they descended the narrow staircase once more. The basement was just as they had left it, the shattered mirror lying in pieces on the floor. But now a strange, dark mist seeped from the cracks in the walls, swirling ominously around the room. "The historian mentioned something about a second ritual," Holly said, her voice shaking. "One that could banish the evil for good, but we need to find the details." They spent hours combing through ancient texts and dusty tomes, piecing together the ritual steps. Holly's hand shook as she read the final instructions. "We need a personal item from the original curator," she said. "Something that belonged to him." Sam's eyes widened. "His office. It's been sealed since the museum closed in the 70s. No one's been in there since." They made their way to the curator's office, breaking the seal on the door. The room was a time capsule, untouched for decades. Dust covered every surface, and cobwebs hung like tattered curtains. Holly rifled through the desk drawers until she found what they needed, a locket containing a portrait of the curator's wife. "Let's do this," she said, gripping the locket tightly. Back in the basement, they began the ritual. Holly recited the incantation, her voice steady despite the terror gnawing at her. The dark mist swirled around them, growing thicker and more oppressive with every word. Sam held the locket aloft, his face set with determination. As they completed the final verse, a deafening roar filled the room. The walls shook and the ground beneath them trembled. The dark mist coalesced into a single, writhing entity, a grotesque mass of shadows and screams. Holly felt its malevolent presence pressing against her mind, threatening to overwhelm her. "Keep going," Sam shouted, his voice barely audible over the cacophony. With a final surge of will, Holly completed the ritual. The locket glowed with an ethereal light, and the dark entity shrieked in agony as it was pulled back into the depths of the earth. The mist dissipated, and the oppressive weight lifted from the room. They collapsed to the floor, exhausted but victorious. "We did it," Holly whispered, her voice filled with relief. As they left the museum, the sun was rising, casting a warm glow over the island. The townsfolk emerged from their homes, their faces filled with hope and curiosity. Holly knew that the darkness had been banished for good this time. But as she boarded the ferry back to the mainland, she couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed. She looked back at the island, its rolling hills and picturesque villages bathed in the morning light. She knew that some battles were never truly over, and some evils could never be fully defeated. Holly vowed to remain vigilant, ready to confront the darkness if it ever returned. The Wretched Wax Museum had been the site of unimaginable horror, but it had also revealed a strength within her that she never knew she had. and with that strength she would face whatever came next, unflinching and unafraid. Thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed this story. Please don't forget to like, and even better, like and subscribe. Thank you very much, and I hope you have a great day.